Welcome to the Project Exodus podcast series on OFM podcasts. Join us weekly as we explore critical topics on addiction and recovery through insightful discussions, heartfelt interviews, and practical Q&A sessions with members of the Project Exodus team and community. Project Exodus is dedicated to making expert recovery interventions accessible to all communities. Through this podcast series, our hope is that understanding and support for those on the path to recovery will be enhanced. Whether you're personally recovering, supporting someone else, or just curious, join us in building a community of awareness, compassion, and hope.
Cool. So welcome to the Project Exodus podcast series. Today, I've got Mpho and Larischa who are going to be joining us for today's discussion. And we're going to be talking about the recovery journey. And so both of you have loads of experience. Larischa, you obviously work on staff Project Exodus, and Mpho has been volunteering and getting involved and just being part of the community. So you both have just years of experience to add today. So the first thing I think is what is the importance of surrender in recovery?
Oh, wow.
I think fundamentally the first thing, a lot of times, and also through my own personal experience, we come into recovery and we kind of, we do the steps. We think that being clean and sober is the way to go. And it's actually not enough. We need to actually surrender to the fact that we had an addiction and the fact that we need help.
I could edify that, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. At the beginning of the journey, it wouldn't have been possible without that acknowledgement of saying that I do not know. I do not know what the next step is. I do not know how to move forward with my life. Hence, surrender is so key, pivotal.
Definitely.
And what's typically difficult to surrender?
I think it's something that's extremely hard to do, to face the facts that you've been in addiction. It has caused so much chaos. You've hurt those around you. You've hurt yourself at the end of the day. And to admit to that and say, I can't do this on my own, is quite a big ask.
Yeah. And for you personally, Mpho, was there anything in your life that you felt like you really struggled to actually surrender and let go?
Plentiful. Not only at the start of my recovery journey, but throughout as well. Because surrendering, I've come to find, is not a once-off type of thing. It definitely is quite a journey in itself, if you will. So pride and ego were some of my biggest factors in trying to relinquish, trying to humble myself in certain spaces, in my own life, in conversing with people. So pride, for sure, I would have to stop it there. Yeah.
Okay. And how are you maintaining that kind of humble attitude now in your everyday life?
That's a good question. It's a good question. I would have to say community. Community really comes into the picture there. But not only community, but being intentional about the people that I have around me. We might go into some other talking points here, but it's being held accountable to the things I say and the things I do as well.
Yeah.
Really, really keeps me humble.
Yeah.
Things like service as well, just out of the generosity of my own heart, if you will, humbling myself in certain spaces, never to forget where I come from, and to always be looking forward is quite humbling.
And what does community look like?
Community looks like having other people around you. In addiction, we spend so much of our time in isolation. We don't want people around us. And we think we can do without people around us. But to have a community who cares and who holds you accountable and who counsels you through all the different processes, there's nothing like it. Social learning is one of those things that nothing compares to it. To be able to sit in a group and have someone talk about their experience and possibly be helping somebody else in the group with a coping skill, there's no comparison.
I'd have to definitely edify that. I've never come to know a community like this. Project Exodus really needs to be put under the spotlight when I say that, because there is no community that's breaking down barriers and breaking down stigmas the way they are, to make it easier, at least for me as an addict, me as somebody who struggles with mental health, me as somebody who just struggles in general with life, to go into a space where I'm accepted, if you will. And again, as Larischa said, that peer-to-peer conversation, that challenging, and it just creates such room for personal development and personal growth. Community is absolutely the catalyst for that. Yeah, there's power in community for me, 100%.
Oh, Larischa, you mentioned social learning. Like, what's the difference between that and any other sort of learning?
So we can put a lot of knowledge and skills into our brains and our minds because, we can do all this reading and we can work a recovery program and those type of things. But to hear personal stories in recovery groups and to understand that, even though every addiction looks different, we still experience the same difficulties. We still experience the same manners of coping that we have to adjust to. Our maladaptive mechanisms are exactly that, and run pretty common throughout all addictions. So, to have somebody sitting there and saying, I'm battling to surrender, or I'm not finding community, or I'm not settling into a program, help somebody else sitting next to them. It's vicarious learning. We tend to hear more when somebody else is talking about it. I go into group every single week knowing that I'm going to learn something. And that's an amazing thing even after 4 or 5 years that I've been in the groups.
Sure.
Yep.
That's awesome. Just a quick one, like what's one of the most profound things you've kind of learned in like a group structure with people?
That's a really hard question because as Larischa just said, every group I walk away from, there's always something. There's always something, man. So off the top of my head, I'm stumped. And I think I'll revert back to saying that there is power in community. So being intentional of being in that space and actually listening. And then not only listening, but going away and processing it myself and developing my own program, if you will, my own route within what was being said in the community, I think is something quite powerful. I can always walk away with something and I can always put something to action.
Yeah. Sure. And besides group sort of therapy and that social learning, what other things would you recommend someone in recovery to do to really be on that journey and growing?
So that's the wonderful thing about Project Exodus is there are so many different avenues to go down, from outpatient programs to recovery groups to one of our fundamental documents being the Life Recovery Plan. I remember coming into the group and the first thing I was given was the Life Recovery Plan, and I tackled it. And it's something I still love teaching till today, to be able to sit in a space where you can plan the way forward. It's not so scary just sitting there going, okay, well, what now? There's actually a plan there for you that says, okay, well, what are your dreams? What is your vision? Speaking life over yourself. And then putting various measures in place for our recovery journey. It takes that aloneness away, and it takes that doubt and insecurities and kind of not knowing where you're going. It replaces that with a solid, firm plan in place. And looking at a program, I know from my own experience, it's not just good enough to stay sober and clean. We need to have a way forward, and we need to make a plan. And then also to understand that addiction is unique in each person, not unique in terms of, what drugs and those type of things, but every makeup is unique. So the recovery journey has to be the same. And in that sense, what Project Exodus offers is so multifaceted. It is an extremely holistic program that takes place.
Oh, that's awesome. And then the Life Recovery Plan, were there any challenges in you personally actually creating that? Like, did you find any roadblocks doing it?
So I'm a big lover of the Life Recovery Plan. I'd really love to see it everywhere in schools and varsities and those type of things. I think when I started it, I had no clue what I was doing, but Google was my friend at that stage. And I think the first time I gave in my LRP, it was about 28 pages. So a lot of research, but also a lot of finding myself. You know, what did I want for me? Where do I want to be going? What do I want to be doing? And so I spend a lot of time teaching it. Like I said, I absolutely love it, and I believe it's foundational to my recovery.
Sure, that's awesome. And Paul, for you, like, what did you find any challenges in creating your LRP?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. The first time that I sat down with the LRP document or its guidelines rather, it was quite difficult to dig deeper and to know what I wanted from my life. It was hard to envision what my life looked like outside of addiction. So in that breath, it was and I say that, but I was able to jot things down. So it was probably like a 6-page document rather. Only to find out through counsel and stuff that there was so much more underneath the surface, so much more to discover, and so much more to input into this. They call it a living document. It's forever going. You know, it's forever changing. It's and with that new light, I was able to take my time first and foremost with my LRP and to discover myself within it. As Larischa said, I was able to actually see and create somewhat the person that I wanted to be, and what behaviors was that gonna need, what was gonna have to take on board, what was gonna have to let go. You know, all these things came to life in this LRP, where I'm also now sitting on probably a 25-page document, and it's forever changing. I've just edited it not too long ago off the back of a career change, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. And what would be the reason to edit the LRP? Like, why would you go back and adjust it?
New lens, new perspective, growth, right? Growth. We don't stay, I hope we don't stay in one spot. So it gives room for the growth that hopefully one encounters and develops within a recovery journey.
Very cool.
Definitely.
And is there anything else, Larischa, that you would recommend someone does after they've done LRP and they're coming to group? Like, what do you think is the next step after that?
So we have a personal development plan that we've kind of put into place, and we encourage all our group members to go through this process. So it looks like life recovery plan. We then guide them through step work, which is steps 1 to 3, which is basically I can't, God can, so let him. And then we work into life story. We find that life story is extremely important for the group members. It helps with awareness, it helps to understand patterns throughout their life, and it also gives a good space for grounding and for processing through some difficult times, and basically just being able to come out on the other side and have a good understanding of who I was and how I came to be here and what I'd like to be doing going forward. And then we have the Exodus Recovery Skills Program, which is an outpatient program, very extensive. We go into numerous subjects and have found that working that program is basically as good as any primary care program in a centre. Yes.
Very cool.
And then afterwards, we get back to the step work with the glorious step 4, which everybody is rather afraid of. But yeah, to continue that until step 12 and have a very good understanding of our recovery and a very good understanding what our addiction looked like. And like I said, a way forward, making amends, service, as Mpho mentioned, service is fundamental. And yes, just moving ahead and moving forward, one foot in front of the other all the time.
That's cool. You mentioned step 4 being scary. Do you want to just briefly just to tell us why that is?
So step 4 basically takes us back to look at, circumstances we've been in, significant relationships we've been in, what happened in those relationships, and then looking at our resentments in that space, resentments that we've built up over years of addiction, and where we could possibly be blaming somebody else for it, but back at the ranch, we actually played a part in it, and we need to acknowledge that. So it's quite a deep dive into your life and into your relationships, but worth it when we get to the end. But it is a rather emotional time to be sitting with step 4.
And then when you mentioned the first step 1, 2, and 3 after the life recovery plan, you said that kind of surrendering to God, like I can't, He can, let Him. Like
Yes.
how important is it to kind of have God be essentially like a part of your recovery?
For me, fundamental, and I'm sure Paul would agree. I wouldn't have recovery if it wasn't for him, and if it wasn't for the journey that I've walked with him during the beginning of my recovery. The most important person in my life, and basically the only thing I'd put in front of my recovery is my relationship with him. Yes.
And Paul, do you want to add to that?
Oh, I could edify it once again, absolutely. And I think if I'm going to backtrack to the beginning of our conversation, or the beginning of this conversation, Larischa mentioned how addiction is actually quite multifaceted, and thus recovery and the recovery process has to be as well. But if we bring it to spirituality, God is or has been the crux of the center, the absolute center of my recovery journey. It was the beginning of it. He'll be in the middle, and He'll be in the end. You know, not to get too spiritual, but absolutely, it's. And if we look at the life development plan or life development pathway, you know, there's certain elements that come into play. Looking at recovery as holistic, and spirituality and spiritual growth is really fundamental in that space. Project Exodus does a beautiful thing of edifying it. We put God first. We do put God
Definitely.
first.
That's awesome. Right. And then you also mentioned for the step work, like going through step 4, there's resentment, there's relationship stuff. Like what role do relationships play within recovery?
Quite substantial. I'm having a good giggle because in the recovery house, it's like relationships don't go, and yet guys just seem to do it anyways. Relationships, in terms of our recovery, we need to be very careful in, you know, what that relationship looks like, who that relationship is with. Especially in early recovery, we can't be concentrating on a relationship and not on our recovery because we're putting somebody else first. I think early recovery is a very selfish journey, but it's much needed. So and then to navigate those relationships that we do have, you know, like I said before, we caused chaos. So there's family members where we need to repair and restore and make amends. There's brothers, sisters, dads, uncles, aunts, that we need to repair those relationships and see what they look like going forward.
You mentioned like it being a selfish thing. A selfish is typically a negative term. So what do you mean when you say recovery is a selfish journey?
So we have quite a simple concept. Anything that comes before our recovery, we need to be prepared to lose because it's that simple. Okay, I can't be trying to work a recovery when I'm trying to solve others, you know, solve relationships and those type of things without knowing that I'm the best version of myself.
Yeah. Paul, do you want to add anything to that?
Edify.
You want to edify?
I think that's going to be the word for the morning, isn't it? I shall edify. Relationships. It's a very interesting one. I mean,
yeah, because I think you spent some time in the recovery house, eh?
correct.
So what did you benefit from that?
well, that's a whole different sphere of relationships. Because in the recovery house, I've been given, I'd say, the opportunity. I wouldn't use such beautiful words, but been challenged in that area of being able to communicate effectively. That's emotionally, that's mentally, that's, you know. So relationships in that sphere really point towards me, which brings it to a selfish program. It really is, and I say that unapologetically. You know, it is anything that I put in front of my recovery, I stand a great chance to lose my recovery. You know. And it's hard, and that's a hard journey and you know, there's certain relationships that have to fall by the wayside or have to be put aside in light of me focusing on myself.
Sure. Are there any significant relationships that you actually had to say?
Absolutely.
Cut you off?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I look at old friendship circles, and by no means bad people, right? Just the behaviors or the person that I was around certain people was not conducive to my health and my mental health, and that branched out in my behaviors and started affecting everybody around me in essence. And these are people that I love dearly, absolutely love dearly, grew up with them. And I had to get to a point where I said, oh, well, once I learned about boundaries, I was able to say, hey, listen, this is where I kind of stop. And I had to walk away from, or I got to walk away. I don't got to walk away, but I did walk away from certain relationships. If I bring it into the family household, it's a bit of a trickier one when it comes to family or maybe significant others. I can't speak there, but when it came to family members, I had to pretty much do the same thing. Family's family, right? I can't necessarily cast them away.
Yeah.
But that's me and my family, right? Personally speaking, I couldn't cast my family away. But again, things like boundaries and communication came into play. But I wouldn't have gotten to that point had I not taken time to say, I'm absolutely focusing on myself and myself only for a good amount of time. And it naturally blends in, and things like amendments and the resentments, I become more aware of them within myself. I'm able to take the responsibility of my actions, you know, and that's for me the whole crux of step 4.
Right.
Yeah, and as a result of that, I'm able to communicate more effectively with those relationships and in those relationship circles. Never forgetting me and my morals and my beliefs and what I stand for.
Right.
Yeah.
And have you also been able to build new relationships, new friendships in recovery, as well as having to let go of old ones?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's bring it back to community.
Sure.
The friendships that I've made have absolutely blown my mind, with people from all walks of life who I would have never gotten the chance to meet, nor mingle with, nor even entertain. So just through community alone, recovery groups, events, you know, it's. I mean, we were at a wedding not too long ago, and it was majority of the people there were in recovery in some way or fashion, and the whole atmosphere was just absolutely life-driven. It was absolutely amazing, and I can say that these relationships, I've got relationships with a lot of those people, and it warms my heart because it's something that I never thought possible. I thought I was stuck in that rut back there. Yeah.
Sure. That's awesome. Right. Well, we've coming to close for today. So is there any closing statements, Larischa, you want to make for today? Or
Yeah, I think just to say to, you know, the people out there who are caught in this type of addiction, there's life, there's hope, there's a future, and that it's all very, very possible. You know, Mpho was talking about being life affirming, and that's the whole thing about Project Exodus, is you're given this opportunity, this amazing opportunity, to create yourself. And I say create because we don't want to recreate. I don't want to be the person that I was. I want to be someone new. So to be able to find hope.
Yeah. So good. Paul, anything you want to edify there?
I don't want to edify, but I don't know how personal I can get, right? Because I do want to share a story about Larischa, and how I came to meet Larischa some 18 months ago. And this is also to the viewers and the listeners, just hopefully to give that crux of hope, especially when it comes to Project Exodus. So I was living on the streets with my family had written me off. It was just through the sheer grace of God that my aunt gave me a final chance, if you will. So from the streets, I moved to her house for a little bit, and I got in contact with Project Exodus. So there pops up Larischa and another gentleman named Chris via Zoom, just to do the inductions for the recovery house, which I was planning to move to via council. And phenomenal reception that I got from the initial Zoom meeting. But never mind that. It was 3 days later that Larischa phoned me up, and she was like, please don't use. I was white knuckling at the time. I was absolutely on the border fence, struggling to imagine a life more than what I was living in, a life more than addiction. And Larischa's phone call was like, please don't use, just hold on. And in her voice, I was able to identify that there was hope. I was able to identify that there was opportunity. But more than that, I was able to identify that there was something that she knew that I didn't know, you know, only to come and relocate my life from Johannesburg to Durban to find out that it was true. There was so much here to be offered. There is so much in life. God wants us to live a life, and he wants us to live it abundantly. Project Exodus offers that.
Mm.
It offers a gateway to abundance and a life of abundance. I think to give anybody hope, I think it's recovery is definitely possible.
Now I want to edify. Just to add on to what Mpho was saying, to be able to find that recovery and that hope yourself, and then to be able to turn around and offer it to someone else is one of the greatest gifts we can offer to anyone caught in the throes of addiction. Yeah.
So good, yeah. That's
Sure.
amazing. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much for using the time and just coming through today and joining us. And thank you guys for tuning in for this episode. If you want to get any more information about Project Exodus, be sure to join on the website www.projectexodus.net. And please do share this podcast with someone, family member, friend who you feel might be able to benefit from what's been shared here, from Mpho's story, Larischa's story, and some of the stuff they've shared. And we'll see you next week for our next episode.